if the student is academically sort of like makes the cut, then they
Yes.
should be deferred. And that also, I just think, like, think about the worst possible application with the best possible transcript. Are you really going to defer a kid in that situation where, like, you know for sure you're not going to admit them because they wrote a one sentence essay and they have 0 things in their activities list, and maybe they didn't even like turn their counselor rec or turn their teacher recs in. It just, I don't know.
Hillary's back. Hi, Hillary.
Hey, Mark. Good to be back.
Thank you. Thank you. We are doing a Grinding My Gears series, both things students and parents do that grind your gears, which, by the way, you need to take that as a hint to avoid, and things colleges do that grind our gears. That's more about us being empathetic if you're frustrated by this, so you won't think something's wrong with you. And we're doing one on the colleges today in this series. And so I'm going to share the topic and then get some thoughts from Hillary. So this one is when colleges defer applicants that they are highly unlikely to admit. So before we dive into this, Hillary, let's not assume people know what deferral means. Deferral is often confused with waitlist. Why don't you explain the difference between deferral and waitlist? And then talk about why it grinds both of our gears.
Yeah. Deferral happens from either an early action or an early decision round when the college, sometimes it happens. I think this year it happened because there were some colleges who had too many applications to review and they didn't have time to get through them all. But usually it's because they've reviewed your application and they want to keep you around, but they don't have capacity to admit you in that round. And so they want to wait until you decide if you want to continue on with them in a regular decision round or perhaps an early decision 2 round. And then they'll look at your application again in that context. And then typically they'll give you a final answer after that. I don't,
Can I add something to that?
yeah.
Yeah. So normally it's one of two things. Either they want to see another semester of academic records because a lot of times they're making a decision without 12th grade and they get to see full 12th grade. Or more commonly, even than that, is they know there's a herd of applicants coming in at a regular round and they just want to be able to compare you to the whole pool. So you look like you may be admissible, but you're not strong enough that they're comfortable allocating a spot to.
I
There
would
are
add
some
one other
people.
thing. I
Yeah,
think
go ahead. Go ahead.
I think yield can also be an issue. So
Sure.
yes,
Sure. Talk
grades,
about that.
yes, are you to regular, but also if you haven't shown a lot of interest or they're not sure
Yeah.
about your fit for the
Yeah.
college, and you're not among the top very most compelling applicants, they might say like, yeah, academically probably we can do, but we're not really sure that you want to be here, either because you don't seem like a good fit or you haven't shown any interest, or maybe they had a why do you want to come to our school essay prompt and you didn't do a very good job on it and you weren't convincing. Those, I think that yield piece can also play into it.
That's absolutely true, and I'm really glad you included that. So yeah, so now you know deferral. I will say this, Hillary, I see a pretty decent, unsurprisingly, number of people that go from defer to wait list. It's very frustrating.
I forgot that Julia had told me that earlier this year
Oh,
to have someone be deferred and then to have them be waitlisted. And she had said that she sees students coming off of the waitlist after they've been deferred, which is crazy. We don't do that at Colorado College, and I know there are lots of other schools that don't also, but there
I, I,
that would do both.
yeah, I would say I see it less often within smaller liberal arts colleges, but it's pretty common with bigger schools,
Well, and those
and
schools
even
are the ones that really grind our gears, right? I mean, those are the ones I'm thinking of,
there.
like the Wisconsins of the world, where if you're not admitted in early, you're probably going to be deferred. And you know that they're deferring way more students than they can actually take in a regular round. And why? Why defer students who are not good candidates for admission?
Yeah, so you're getting a double dose here of grinding my gears. So that the deferral to wait list it's a grind my gears in and of itself for both of us,
Yeah.
But this is a slightly different one we're focusing on, which is why are you deferring someone you're highly unlikely to admit? And I'm sorry, I'm naming names here, Harvard, MIT. Like, why are you doing it? And you know, Hillary, I once had by far the biggest argument I ever had when I was in admissions with another, I was associate director, and it was over this topic. And there is a school of thought out there, which is if you're academically admissible, the kid has a right to know that they were academically admissible. And so some people feel like by telling them you're deferred, we're sending a message that you were good enough academically or we would have denied it. And they know that kids take deferrals not as hard as denials. But why I don't like it is because of the false hope it generates. And then I have people fixating on, well, at least I wasn't denied. And then they just get fixated on something. And in some cases, is a very low probability, Harvard, MIT, that you're going to have your status changed. So I don't understand why schools do it. And it's a philosophical thing because there's other schools that don't defer very many kids at all. And if they defer you, then, Yale, Stanford, Vanderbilt, it means you were pretty close. Princeton, it never used to be. Princeton used to be like a Harvard, but now they've changed. That's a much better way to go. It should be, you don't do this that often because you don't need an insurance policy that is that long. Now, I once interviewed Gary Clark from UCLA on the topic of why our wait list is so long. And of course, that's wait list different than deferral. But in some ways, there's a lot of similarities. There's still sort of, in some ways, insurance if you need to have these kids to meet your class. They're similar in that regard, although you don't know. There's certainly some differences, but that situation's a little different because, they got a factor for in state, out of state. And then, other than like their arts and sciences, that big college there, they are looking at a lot of individual majors, and some of those, like the complexity of majors plus in state, out of state, can lead you to need to have a longer list sometimes. So each situation is a little different, but I'm talking about like some schools, you absolutely do not need that many kids, and then you're gonna have a really low rate of who you're
Mhm.
gonna take, and then there's no communication.
Yeah.
What is your theory on why it happens?
I don't know. I'd never thought about it being like an easier letdown for kids. I have to say I disagree with that. I've seen my own kids and their friends get deferred and it didn't feel at that moment when you receive that letter, I don't think it feels much different to a kid from a deny, even when it should feel different, even from a school like CC where our admit rate from defer is actually really high and it should feel like a foot in the door, but it's so deflating for students. So I don't really buy that it's like a more humane option than denying students. I don't know why.
I'm
I
gonna
don't
slightly disagree
I
with
mean,
something you said.
maybe
If
it's
you're new to your
lazy.
college-bound kid, we're just totally honest and real. I do find consistently for both waitlist and defer, kids will lap onto that and say, you know, "Oh, at least I wasn't denied," in terms of they do tend to take it as a very strong consolation prize. But the problem is, to me, is it's delaying the inevitable.
Right.
And I've often used the analogy of it's like asking a girl to go out to the prom and she says, let me think about it, maybe. And then you ask again and let me think about it, maybe. And meanwhile, she's never going to say yes and you've lost out on other options. So that's kind of how I see it. But
And I think,
I
like, I
don't,
don't know what you were saying about how if the student is academically sort of like makes the cut, then they
yes.
should be deferred. And that also, I just think, like, think about the worst possible application with the best possible transcript. Are you really going to defer a kid in that situation where, like, for sure you're not going to admit them because they wrote a sentence essay and they have zero things in their activities list and maybe they didn't even like turn their counselor rec or turn their teacher recs in. I like it just I don't know. I don't think kids are thinking about their transcript as being separate from the rest of their application. And so kids aren't going to get that. Like, oh, I'm academically capable of doing the work here. So they deferred me, even though I didn't try at all on my application.
Really need to interview some schools and ask them for the reason. I can only think of two reasons. One is the reason I postulated a second ago, and the other is just ultra, ultra, ultra conservative. Who knows? We have another whatever COVID stuff that happened with internationals this year, and we never know what's going to happen. And on extreme cases, we'd like to keep you around because certainly when you deny somebody, you're cutting them loose.
Mhm.
That's the only thing that I can think of, but it's just so unnecessary. Like you have enough statistical data to know that you don't need to defer that many people when
Right.
there's just absolutely no way. So I
Especially
still
for a
can't.
school that's that selective and has such a high yield, like an MIT
Correct.
or a Harvard, it doesn't really that argument doesn't really fly for me. I could see it more with a school where things are a little bit more uncertain,
Sure. And
but
friends,
harder
if
to
you're
make the
not
argument.
familiar with that term yield is just the percentage of people that say yes to your offer, right? So we say yield drives the whole bus because in your admissions, you got a number, you got to hit that number, you got to get the right number of heads and beds. And so you got to be able to figure out how many kids you need to admit in order to get the number that you need. And that number is all over the place. For one school, it could be over 80%. Another school, it could be under 10%.
Hmm.
And then but it's more complicated even than that because, you'll know that you might, for example, know you yield kids who are closer to home than kids who are further away, or you yield kids that had lower overall academic and personal ratings or whatever your rating system is than the high flyers who are going to have tons and tons of options, usually against places that are hard to compete with. Like there's a lot of factors. You might have an incredibly strong program and you have a higher yield in that program than something else. So it's very complicated. A lot of art and science goes into researching this whole thing. But you'll hear us use this term yield a lot because like you really need to know what percentage of kids that you admit are going to come in order to figure out how many to admit. And it's not as simple as just, well, it's 20%, as it can be very different for one type of kid versus another type of kid. Did anything else need to say on that, Hillary, or do you think I
No, I
covered
think we
yield?
covered it.
Cool. All right, Hillary. Well, thank you for venting with me. It's nice to know I'm
Yes.
not the only one who finds these things exacerbating.
Irritating. Yep. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you. And friends, if you like this, click the bell notification and you'll get new videos delivered right into your inbox right away. Share it with a friend, comment below, and click the like button. And we'll see you in the next one.